Hello there, Samuel Kyber here with the behind the scenes to Space Derp. For this animation I wanted to explore space. Sci-fi is a big passion of mine and I enjoy telling stories in that setting, as evident by some of my animations. We haven't seen a derp story in a while, so I adapted the idea around him. I wrote a few simple bullet points, then expanded them into more detailed notes. I wanted a mix of fun adventure with a sense of danger and mystery, but ultimately end on a happy note. I started with a bunch of different ideas, like derp falling through a wormhole, running out of fuel in space, or finding out the moon was made of cheese. I landed on the alien idea because I wanted to have a dynamic between two characters rather than just derp on his own. The animation starts with the sheer power of a rocket to hook people right from the beginning. This rocket design was based on the SpaceX Falcon Heavy. I modified an existing design I found on Planet Minecraft. The map I used was a Kerbal Space Program launch site, the link will be in the description. However, it didn't have any vegetation, so I brought in a few tree and grass assets, created a hair particle system on the ground, which generated a vegetation around the whole map. I always enjoy watching the SpaceX launches, so I put David, Dan and myself on the sofa, watching it on TV like we used to when we lived together. The footage on the TV was made using an image sequence, then I gave it an emissive shader. In the background, Skyfall is sleeping like a bat and Thomas is holding a Halo assault rifle. I updated the fanart wall, but I don't think you can really see it in any of the shots. But the purpose of this scene was to show Derp's inspiration for his trip to the moon. One of the old story ideas I had was to show Derp trying to build a rocket, but then he failed, and then he went up and looked through the telescope, and he saw his fish on the moon, which then motivates him to actually build his rocket properly now that he has a goal. But instead I went with the alien idea. I modelled a telescope, which Derp uses on the balcony to look up at the moon. And to create the effect of him looking through the telescope, I just used a simple elliptical mask in Sony Vegas. The pool sequence was a reference to an old TV show I used to watch called Thunderbirds. Probably none of you have heard of it. To do so, I isolated the pool in Blender and extended the sides down, gave it a floor, and just moved it underneath the map. But it was actually appearing above the terrain, so what I did was I keyframed a piece of terrain to just appear on the shot when it's moving underneath the map. The sound design here was pretty dramatic. And actually underneath the map there isn't really anything, there's no launch site, it's just a void. This rocket design was based off the SpaceX Starship. I was gonna have like a giant Saturn V-esque rocket and a separate moon lander, but I tried to design a moon lander and it wasn't really working out, so I went with the reusable rocket design. For the rocket's engine, I made a sphere and then cut it in half, I stretched it out, and I added a wave modifier to create the kind of spitting fire flame effect. And then I added an orange emissive Voronoi noise texture to give it its colour. Then I duplicated it and made it smaller and brighter to have kind of the hotter centre. I really enjoyed doing the sound design of the rockets, that's probably some of the most fun stuff in this animation. I layered a bunch of engine sounds with explosions to really give it that oomph. Initially I tried using smoke simulation to create actual smoke, since most of the launches you just see this big plume of smoke just like go everywhere. But smoke sims take so long to bake and I was getting nowhere with the design, it looked pretty awful to be honest. The particles were made using the same meshes we use for TNT explosions to simulate sparks coming out of the engine, which worked as a nice compromise to the smoke. The daytime lighting is getting a bit easier for me with a low sun strength and a blue mist, and I had to lower the quartz material brightness as the sun was just overexposing them. And then Derp arrives on the moon. I made Derp's spacesuit look similar to his regular clothing by having the high trousers and belt in the same place. The moon map was created by Epic Necromancer, the link to that map will be in the description. It was a moon map made in the end, and it was one of the very few decent ones I found that had nice craters in the world and a giant mountain as well. I changed the material to sand and desaturated it to look like moon terrain. When the scene animation was finished, I isolated the areas of the map that were on camera and added a very similar hair particle system to the one I used in the previous scene. I used a collection of small stone assets to add detail to the otherwise flat terrain. The look of the moon was inspired by this screenshot from the KSP2 trailer. The lighting was a bit tricky as there wasn't really much terrain to take advantage of with mist, and the light coloured terrain usually gets pretty overexposed. I used a very subtle white mist to give the moon a glow from the bright sun, and usually I had the sun at a pretty low angle to create those large dark shadows. The colour correction here just removed a touch of red and added a bit more contrast. The sky texture was a HDRI from the Pro Lighting Skies pack. The Earth model was made by Omeletto and featured in his Saving Sam's Tea animation. Derp's arrival to the moon was to take advantage of the low gravity for fun, to contrast the dramatic reveal. For those who don't know, this is a reference to my Worlds Apart animation. I always like going for those wallpaper shots. The entire scene that follows was initially going to be very different. Derp was only going to find a single ship that crashed, and it wasn't going to be Drogue at all. I wanted a unique alien spaceship design to show the alien had crashed here all alone. Kinda like the traditional flying saucer. Derp would then explore the wreckage and find the alien had stolen Derp's fish. They would have fought over it, and eventually Derp would get his fish back. The alien would flee and attempt to steal Derp's rocket, and what follows would have been the same. However, this idea didn't really make much sense, and was changed about halfway through production. It started with the struggle of coming up with a UFO and alien design, and then realizing the alien really didn't have any motivation to steal the fish in the first place. It was only there to create conflict, but it made the alien rather dislikable, and the conflict was kind of unnecessary. I had all these Worlds Apart assets that I could use, and it led to changing the scene entirely. Initially, the alien was actually going to be a Drogue, with blue energy to show that it was friendly. But it felt like it took away from the threatening aspect of the Drogue, and people might have started to see them as a joke. So I came up with a simple design for our little green friend here. Giving it tall black eyes and a small mouth really made it look kinda cute, but getting the proportions right created some terrifying results. The green design was a little basic, so I gave it the indoctrinated Drogue armor, and it turned out pretty good. That also gives some backstory to what happened to the alien, and creates immediate sympathy for it, for those who have seen Worlds Apart, and know what that armor represents. The alien's weapon was a very basic ray gun design. For the VFX I started with Varric's cannon projectile from Worlds Apart, and deleted various layers from it, adjusted the shape, changed the colour, and animated it to scale up and move forward when it's fired to create the propulsion effect. It was originally going to be similar to the Fusro Dar shout from Skyrim, but I couldn't get it looking quite good. For sound design, I used a sci-fi plasma gun from the Boom library. The alien was animated with a bit more bounce to it, having it leap up to the fish like it's all excited and carrying the power source above its head later. And the alien's mission was to really build a rocket to return home. The rocket was a smaller version of the giant engines from the Drogue Fortress. Smashing it to pieces was a simple rigid body physics animation. I flew an icosphere into the side of it and decreased the strength of gravity to simulate the moon's lower gravity. This event then created a reason for the alien to steal Derp's rocket later on. The rocket interior had a few Easter eggs, a piece of fan art by Assassin featuring the Derpy characters on a picture frame, the clock permanently stuck at 239, the Normandy from my favourite franchise Mass Effect, a can of Derp juice, Derp's shotgun from Blocking Dead, and a laptop showing the blender scene of a laptop showing the blender scene of a... you get the idea. Interior lighting had a point light in the middle, with emissive ceiling lights above the shelves. The crash sequence had a particle system attached to the bottom of the rocket emitting small stone particles, and now that the crash has happened, both characters have caused a problem for the other, giving them an opportunity to become friends and help one another. Usually our derp animations end on a funny gag that's really intense, like the fish explosion in Tiny Derp, but I wanted a more heartfelt ending to really solidify the new friendship. They gave each other something to remember them by. Derp gets the gun and the alien gets the rocket. This sequence contained kind of a throwback to Worlds Apart. Sam was there to comfort Derp, as he knows what it feels like to say goodbye to someone. Sunset lighting is always fun to do, getting the nice orange mist towards the sun and low sunlight to create large dark shadows. The final sequence mirrors the opening, but with a contrasting vibe. The first scene has Derp all excited, and this one has him feeling rather sad. It was nice to end on a bittersweet moment. The Worlds Apart cameo was honestly just that. It was just a cameo. It isn't leading into a sequel. The story concluded in Worlds Apart 3. All in all, I enjoyed working on this one. It was nice to explore something I'm interested in, but keep it familiar to those who enjoy watching Derp be Derp. I want my next project to be more ambitious, but we'll see what I can come up with. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.